Okay, I think then in that case we'll make a start. Good afternoon, everybody. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Giles Claydon, and I'm the Deputy Programme Manager supporting Keith Clark. As part of this call goes, I've been on the programme for about 6 months now, and probably over the last 3 months been quite heavily involved in a lot of the R3 replan activities, particularly over the last quarter. So if we could go on to the next slide, please, Joe. So just in terms of a couple of immediate introductions on this call as I run through the agenda. We have Jenny Booth from Ofgem here today, just to impart a sponsor message at the start of this call. So thank you, Jenny, for making this. And then, having gone through the sponsor message, I'm going to hand over to Keith Clark, who probably doesn't need any introduction, but Keith is the programme manager. He's going to talk through the round 3 objectives and approach. And then the agenda will come back to me to talk you through the high-level programme plan. And then lastly, I'm going to hand over to my colleagues as the SME leads to talk through each of the phases of the programme, and I'll ask them to introduce themselves as they present each of their sections. A lot of the content this afternoon will be drawn from one of the key artifacts in one of the key artifacts, I should say, in the R3 replan, which is the implementation approach, which is a new structure. We've also included some additional material that we've developed just in response to queries or a theme of queries that we've had since we issued the papers or the artifacts in December. In terms of the structure this afternoon, we're going to pause at various points along the way for questions. I would also say, we really welcome the questions. It's good to keep this. I think this playback to you as dynamic and discursive as possible. And if you don't want to call out the question, please feel free to put them in the chat, and I'm very happy to sort of chair those back across my colleagues to answer as well. But please do ask questions, because it helps us know that whether we're complete in the information that we're hopefully going to impart to you this afternoon, if you haven't already gleaned a lot of this from the artifacts already. The one final area I just want to highlight is we are recording this. It will be published up on the collaboration portal or website. At the end of this call, I will repeat this at the end because we seem to have had a few requests coming through. You will see a link in Teams. It's just the way Teams seems to work. Please don't request access through that, because the recording will sit behind our firewalls, and we still won't be able to give you access. So we will publish this recording in the next 24 hours, or certainly I'd imagine by Monday morning latest. So I think if there are no further questions on what we're going to talk through this afternoon, I am going to hand over to Jenny, who's going to talk you through the sort of the key message from the sponsor. Jenny, over to you.
Great, thanks, Giles. Good afternoon, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Jenny Booth. I'm heading up the HHS team in Ofgem. The HHS program is one of a key program for us to achieve net zero, and therefore it is one of the priority programs for Ofgem and for BEIS. BEIS in particular have a keen interest in this program being implemented as soon as possible, because they see it as an enabler for a number of their strategic projects, including the delivery of EV infrastructure and of course the big main flexibility program. As such, it is quite important that we do have a robust and credible plan. If dates are Therefore, it is going to be incredibly important for participants to utilize these playback sessions, but also in your responses to give as much granular information to the program as possible so that they can do their necessary analysis and justify the timelines being presented in the plan. Um, One of the things that we will be doing, it is very likely the plan will come to Ofgem for approval. So we will be scrutinising what is being presented in front of us and checking and challenging the programme to justify what is presented. And therefore, it will be really, really important that they have the information to justify their position. So the real message I would like to give to industry and industry colleagues is to fully utilize these sessions and also provide the robust as possible feedback to the consultation for round 3. Um, Not much else to say on top of that. So subject to any questions, I'll hand back to Giles.
Okay, thanks, Jenny. Any questions for Jenny before we move on? Let's see any hands. Okay, thanks, Jenny. If we can move on, please, Joe. So I'm just going to hand over to Keith now to talk us through the round 3 objectives and approach. Keith, over to you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Very briefly then on this side, as you know, we're seeking to get a solid plan, as Jenny mentioned, and as it's expected. The consultation process, primarily, we're looking to get your feedback on what we believe is a more fulsome set of artifacts than previously has been produced to you, which I'll talk about more in a minute. But obviously, we want to get your views on that. We also want at the same time to get your evidence, your feedback on the plans, the DBT plans that you currently have in hand, either detailed plans ideally, or even timelines that demonstrate when you believe your DBT activities will be complete. And round 3 is also in order for us to assess interest in parties, interest in SIP participation, and as you know, we are looking to start SIT as early as possible, and with a good set of participants to enable us to demonstrate that the systems can be integrated. So the round 3 consultation has asked for all responses by the end of January, and ideally by the 16th if you're interested in SIT. But everybody will be considered for SIT, even if they express interest between the end of the 16th of September, January, and the end of January. So the mid-January deadline is, we're already already starting to get some responses from participants to that deadline. So it's clear that there are some participants out there who are really keen to show us that they're on the front foot and have their organisation, mobilisation and planning in place to be able to participate in SIT, which is great to see. And we're looking forward to everybody else's responses in the coming weeks. Next slide, please, Joe. I don't know about anybody else, but it doesn't seem to have moved.
Seems to have got stuck. Joe, I think you may have the problem you had earlier. You may need to come out and go back in again. We lost Joe.
I think the signs he's rebooting it.
Yeah.
Have you got next slide, Joe? Oh, there we go. Right. Now the anticlimax. So, as Charles mentioned, the implementation approach is the thing that we want to kind of bring to life today, and we'll extract a lot of content from that. But that's the helicopter view of the plan, and it brings an end-to-end view of the plan, which hopefully will help set a context for your review of the documents. We have a much more comprehensive set of documents, the Microsoft project plan, the dependency and milestone registers, and the RAID elements. And whilst we have tried to provide a good level of plan on a page level communications, we do ask you to look at the detailed documents, because POAPs or POAPs don't really tell you the whole story, and it's really important to get down into the detail. And the consultation questions we put in place online this time should make it a bit more of a digestible process of replying to us. We do expect everybody to respond to the consultation in line with obligations, and we will be tracking that with the programme steering group in the coming months, as we recently did with the REN Assessment 2 responses. But the key point I'd like to make about the plan, round 1 and round 2 were really ways of getting the plan into the consciousness of all participants and getting a good understanding about the thinking at that stage. Round 3 is more specific and more detailed, but during this quarter we are seeking to ensure that the detailed delivery approaches are properly discussed through programme governance, through working groups, with consensus across participants' SMEs. And ideally, by the time we get to the end of this quarter, when we have a proposed plan for being the rebaseline plan, it should be founded upon delivery approaches which have gone through those working groups and gone through governance, and actually has a real support, because we know that we want this programme to be very much industry led, and in that sense we need your inputs, not just through the round 3 consultation, but your active participation in the working groups, so that we get that consensus about the detail, because there are still assumptions and uncertainties in the round 3 plan. By using governance in the right way, we're hoping that the rebaseline plan will have a lot less uncertainty and a lot less assumption, and be founded on those consensus building that's happening through working groups. So that's important, that you turn up to those working groups, influence the thinking about how this will actually work on the ground, and then the rebaseline plan should reflect that thinking and those discussions as we get to the end of this calendar quarter. Okay, Giles, that's it from me.
Okay, thanks, Keith. Any questions for Keith before we move on? No? Okay. So what I'd like to do in this section is just to talk you through the high level plan before we take more of a deep dive into each of the phases across the plan in the next few sections of this afternoon. So this plan here, many of you will have probably seen this in the implementation approach, but just to declare, this is one of those areas where we have made a couple of corrections and also a change. So just to highlight those, in case you are comparing to the previous artifacts, if you just look to the top left-hand box in the under the milestones at the top, M11 and M12, that originally said a 1-year migration. We've actually just corrected that to 18 months. That it was always correct in the timescales in the artifact. It was just that they were inconsistent and we didn't get that right at the top. CP3, which stands for critical path, which I'll talk through in a moment. That on this in the top right hand box, that says September 25 now, which was corrected from July 25. The other swim lane, and I'll come on to this in a little bit more detail as I go through the plan, is in the middle of the plan. You will see non-sit LDSO testing as quite a narrow swim lane in a kind of off red burgundy type colour. We've just elevated this into this plan on a page because it is fairly key. It was always in the detailed project plans that we provided as artifacts, but I think we wanted to draw this out through these playbacks as a critical component in hindsight. So those are 3 new amendments there, as in all the slides where we slightly changed them. You'll see a box at the top in red, which will just call out where we've made some key changes, so you can today. So just to talk to this diagram. touch upon, you'll see here that we've called out 3 critical paths in terms of the route that participants might well take to get to go live. The fastest of those is centered around what we've been terming within the program as a minimum viable cohort. And the minimum viable cohort is the minimum composition of participants that we recognise that we need in order to functionally exercise and test all aspects of the core systems. And the minimum viable cohort effectively marks the fastest route or path through the plan and the program to get to migration. And the main reason, or the reason for that, is that by participating in SIT, participants will not have to participate in qualification, with the exception of having to complete what's known as the SAD process, or the self-assessment document process, which is a self-assessment of the back-end systems. So the MVC critical path, or well, sent on the MVC, is denoted on this plan by the rather heavy dashed line that you can see there on the left-hand side. The next fastest critical path is for those participants that elect to come into the program through the qualification path. And that middle critical path essentially represents the first tranche to roll off, or out of, I should say, the qualification testing side into migration. And you can see there that we've got an elapsed time of about 6 to 8 months between those critical paths, and that effectively represents one of the key benefits of participating in SIT, in terms of being able to be an early adopter or first mover, and being able to put out to the market some of the new propositions that will be enabled by the half-hourly settlement program. So that sort of elapsed time is definitely one of the key advantages of electing to participate in the SIT testing. The final critical path that you see here is in the hard red line. That represents the other end of the bookend, as it were, and that is the slowest tranche to go through qualification, or the last tranche, I should say, and the path that takes in order to go in at the final stages, and then clearly then follows through on the migration route for those late participants. And to the purists amongst you, that critical path is essentially the critical path for the programs. It's the critical path to the new settlement code timescales coming into effect in 2027. So that's just a brief overview of the 3 variants of critical path that we've put on this diagram here. So turning to each of the phases, the first uppermost swim lane I just want to talk to is around the system design and build. This is where the major focus of the program currently lies at the moment, where we are going through the SI QA assurance path for those central parties looking to for the central parties, because they will be absolutely key for us getting into systems integration towards the tail end of this year. As we go through this route, and as we go through the round 3 consultation, that group of participants will inherently expand once we understand who wishes to come forward for SIT, and therefore participate, who will come forward for SIT, and therefore they will come into the group that we'll then actively monitor through this design and build stage. So I thought I saw a question, but I'll come back in a minute. So that's system design and build. Once those participants have gone through PIT, which is the exit point for that, they will then come into the SIT arena, and that starts off with component integration, and then that leads into the full functional testing in SIT. And the key part of this is really to get those participants through the SIP functional testing as quickly as possible, because that allows us then to prove the central core design for half-hourly settlement as a basis for setting up the UIT environment that's needed for qualification, where we expect probably most of the participants will actually enter the program. So what you can see here on the critical path is it drops vertically down into qualification, and that starts the start of qualification, where participants or the early tranche of participants will be able to enter. Qualification area of the plan where we, as the sort of the central part of the program, are at arm's length in terms of the accountability for this process. But the assumptions that this is built around, which the code warders are bought into, is that this period is effectively comprised of 7 tranches, and each of those tranches takes about 6 months. And at either end of that, we've allowed 2 months for the governance process to take place through the Performance Assurance Board, and they will control entry and exit from qualification. I think that's it on qualification. I'm just moving on further down to the regulatory and code drafting aspects. Again, as the gaps in this plan probably suggest to you that this is not on the critical path, but the one area I do just want to highlight is that there is a need for the code to be finally signed off before we enter into migration. I'm just going to step back to one area which I have glossed over. I'm sorry to leap back, but I mentioned at the start around the non-SIT LDSO testing. This is in the plan here because we recognise it's absolutely critical for all the LDSOs nationally to have tested to the equivalence of the qualification testing point, and they are needed to have qualified in order for the first MVC tranche to go live. So that just explains the timing for that LDSO activity there in the non-SIT LDSO testing timescale. So the final couple of swim lanes, just to cover off. The final stage is migration. In a difference to round 2, we have extended the overall window for migration out to 18 months. So you'll see from the first point of the MVC on the hard dashed line starting and the end of the migration window. That's 18 months, and then essentially there's just over 12 months for those in those qualifying those qualifying to enter migration. There's a 12-month window for those. We've done some modelling on that, and as we go through the next section, aid will pick up on how we've modelled that. But certainly our provisional estimates show that in the previous rounds we haven't really afforded a sufficiently long window to enable the migration of MPANs. The final stage here is for the new new settlement code to us to transition over to that. There's a gap of about 2 months there, or a minimum gap of 2 months. We may well wait longer. There's a stabilization period before we will allow that to cut in, just to make sure that all the central systems are stable before going over, before moving over to the new code. So I think I'm going to stop there and ask if there are any questions. That's a very quick run through where the plan is, and yeah, I'm just reading the question that's come up here. So we've got a question from so I'm trying to read where the question came in from. Actually, I've missed it.
It's from Simon Higgins.
Simon Higgins. Sorry, Simon. I was struggling with Teams there just to see. Thank you, Simon.
Just asking if you're going to publish this updated POPE.
Yeah, absolutely. We will do. These materials are probably already up there for the previous playbacks that we've had this week, and we'll publish this as it's appeared here as well on the collaboration website as well. So absolutely, they'll be available to you. there any other questions? Okay. I think with that we will move on and go into
Giles,
the. Oh, sorry. Yeah, another one.
Tom's got his hand up.
Oh, okay. Sorry, Tom. I can't seem to be seeing hands on here very easily. Do apologise, Tom.
Okay.
Over to you.
Are you going to go in this presentation, go on and talk about various phases? Because what I wanted to do was raise the question about qualification.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to step through each of the phases, and I think did you say qualification? You wanted to ask about?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. We got to. Yeah, Jason's going to present the qualification area as we go through the next sections. So we're now going to break out each of these sections. Sorry, Tom.
I'll probably leave my question till then.
Yeah, I think so. We'll cover each of these in a lot more detail in the next in the next sections. And I know there's another question in the chat, so I was flicking between screens here. I think Laura's asked a question. The first option is set, the second qualification. What is the term for the third?
Laurie, I think I'll probably cover it under qualification, but of the three critical paths, the first one is SIT. The middle one is the first potential, the first person to the first organization to go through qualification, and the last line is the last person to go through qualification. So I'll talk a bit about the tranches of qualification a bit later, but that's what the three lines. You aren't in SIT and you're in qualification, the middle line with start of migration, I think it's in September 25, can't quite read it. That's your first opportunity to complete qualification and go into migration. And then the last line is if you're the last person through qualification, that's when you start migration. So you can see the advantage of SIT participation and early qualification because it gives you longer to do migration. Hopefully that answers your question, Laurie. Is that what you were after? Yeah.
No, well, you know our view and our position going into SIT. It was just the last tranche didn't seem to be much of a name when we got SIT and qualification. Is it just known as the last tranche? I suppose it is.
Yeah, it's just we have a principle of tranche and qualification, and well, I'll cover it now.
No, don't jump around the map. It was just a genuine, honest question. I was just wondering if it had a better, cuter name than just the last tranche.
It's the last tranche qualification.
Okay, I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Yeah, and the way that line drops down, it's aligned with the M14 milestone as well, which is probably not as obvious on this quite compressed diagram here. So let's move on. If there are no, sorry, I just seen another question come through. Will we discuss or will we have slides to call? Sorry, I'm reading the question from Neil Walker. Yes, we will do, and the slides we're about to present will hopefully answer your question, Neil, that you have there. So we'll move on to design, build and test. I'm going to hand over to Paul to talk us through this. So Paul, if you'd just like to introduce yourself.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Paul Pettit. I head up the LDPSI design team. Before my colleagues start to get into the nitty-gritty of testing PIT and SIT, this is just a quick couple of minutes just to let you know where we are and how we're going to support you going through the next phase of the program. So as most of you are aware, the work-off plan is underway. The design work-off plan is underway. That's going to the design advisory group on the 1st of February for approval. Once that goes through that, the intention is that all of the baseline design artifacts will be uplifted and made available on the portal collaboration base on the 8th of February. In parallel to that, we're going to be augmenting the design artifacts to provide extended views of the design tailored to individuals. So whether you're a supplier, LDSO, etc., you'll be able to see your requirements, interfaces, etc., that appertain to you specifically. So we're really there to support you in that process. We are playing another role in basically performing a participant design assurance type role, and that's basically looking at and working with you and meeting with you individually to basically get an individual view of your readiness to go into particularly SIT. We're going to be very interested in basically, your setup, making sure that you understand what your business processes are, your interfaces, etc. throughout that run up to SIT, because obviously we want PIT and SIT to be a success. And we've also got the design mailbox. I know some of you are already using that. It's been around for some time. My team and the SRO team are basically, we constantly monitor this box and respond to queries. So that will remain and persist throughout this whole process. So it's really us saying we're here to help you. We're going to be issuing guidance around the participant assurance stuff. It's nothing to be concerned about. It's basically, so we can get comfort that you guys are ready, and also take an opportunity to really help you out and help you through the design, build and testing phases of the program. To that end, I'm going to hand over to my colleague Nigel, who will take you through the detail of DBT 1 and 2. If there's any questions, happy to answer them. But over to you, Nigel.
Thank you very much. Hi, my name's Nigel Hunt. I work in the SI test team. I'm going to talk through the T part of DBT, in other words, PIT for DBT 1 and DBT 2 and migration. So DBT 1, I think, as Paul's alluded to, is around the coverage of the scope within the RTM that covers, or target operating model, of all parties and participants that sit within the MHHS scope. DBT 2 is a back-end systems and consequential change. So DBT 1. So I say, I think Paul sort of described how we find by area, how we get the scope and how that's built and how he will support that. From a testing perspective, we'll provide a guidance document, and that's coming out at the end of this month. Into SIT, and I'll talk through that a bit more in a minute. DBT 2, again, similar process, but I say it's back-end systems consequential change. That is not required to enter into SIT, as required to be completed prior to the completion of qualification. Again, we will support the scope of DBT 2 for the consequential change impact assessment group. Can we go on to the next slide, please, Joe? So talking about PIT. So PIT is required whether you go through either the SIT route or the qualification route. It's a precursor to either one of them. PIT comprises the functional, non-functional and regression as required. The requirements again set out in the RTM, as Paul's talked about. So this, again, the scope of the MHHS program. PIT is the responsibility of each of the individual parties, and that means their systems, their test environments, all associated test data, your scenarios and scripts, whatever test processes you currently use or want to use, your test management tool and associated defect management process. What we shall do is we will support this by, again, we'll provide the templates for these through the guidance document, but we will support and assess these documents as they come through and assure them. And that will be the PIT approach and test plan. It says here the requirements traceability matrix. It's actually the requirements test traceability matrix, which is different obviously from the one that Paul's talked about, and it obviously works alongside that. So where you'd have your normal traceability, this is about how you balance. Obviously your PIT scenarios and test scripts. We'd expect some regular execution test reports talking about your issues and defects and progress. Again, there'll be more detail of the expectation of that as a template, but you can use your own template as long as you have that information in it. That will come out in the guidance document at the end of the month. And importantly, the PIT test completion report. So this will be this will be the final part of the PIT. It will be the precursor to going into SIT or qualification, whichever route you want to go down. That's good. I think that's probably it. Yeah, that's it for me. Are there any questions for me? If not, thank you very much. And I'll pass you over to Dom.
Yeah, Dom, over to you.
Thanks, guys. So for those of you that I haven't met, my name's Dominic Mooney, and I'm the SIT lead on the programme. So I'm just going to provide an overview of the SIT to begin with, and then I'll talk you through the roadmap into entering SIT and how we're going to manage that and the associated timelines, and how that relates also to some of the non-SIT testing that's planned. So the integration testing will require two core elements. So Nigel's just talked about pre-integration testing. So as a entry criteria into SIT testing for those that are volunteering, we'll expect evidenced testing of functional, non-functional and migration related characteristics. This alongside some other readiness criteria in terms of environment connectivity and defining test steps within the scripts, and ensuring that all participants that are involved have been onboarded onto the test management tool. And then there will be the systems integration testing itself, which is broken down into various stages, which will cover functional, non-functional and migration-related testing within a fully integrated environment in SIT. As an SI, we'll be assuring test readiness of SIT entrants. We'll be providing an approach and plan and also a test data approach and plan, which are being developed through the SIT working group, and we recommend that those people that are interested in getting involved in SIT, and please come along to those working groups, and we'll be pleased to help you with any queries on any of the aspects of the SIT testing. We'll also be specifying scenarios and scripts for SIT based on the design. We'll be verifying the PIT exit criteria has been met via assurance. And then we'll also, during the SIT execution, also be assuring those results. Availability of relevant test harnesses, coordinating test environment preparation activities and support, and providing participants with data to test with during SIT. And then we'll also be managing the SIT process and the schedule. As I've mentioned, we're going to have a test management tool, which is going to be ADO based, and we'll be providing access and training guidance to that and general support throughout. And we'll also be providing defect and issue management for all the centrally raised issues, including their triage, and that will extend to environments as well. So in terms of the deliverables that we'll be producing for each stage, there'll be an approach and plan, test data approach and plan. We'll be asking participants as they enter each stage to provide us with a readiness report. We'll then produce an overarching readiness report, which will go through programme assurance and governance. And we'll also be providing test completion reports at the end of testing, and also a defect management plan and test management tool user guide. If you don't mind, Joe, we can move on to the next slide. So central to the approach is a program construct called the minimum viable cohort. What this is once we've got into SIT functional testing, what we'll be looking for is a minimum group of SIT participants that we need in order to exercise the solution roles. That said, we will be accepting volunteers into SIT and supporting anyone that's outside of this MVC group. And so we'll what we'll be doing is when we get into SIT functional, we'll be monitoring the progress of participants, and those that are executing successfully the quickest will then prioritise the testing schedule and agenda to support the progress of the MVC in order to exercise the full solution as quickly as possible. The MVC will consist of all of the providers of central systems, and then we'll also be including St Clement's and DNOs providing MPRS, DNOs providing network operations services and UMSO services, and supplier agents, and also at least 2 of the other systems, so 2 of each service provider and at least 2 suppliers. So that forms the MVC, but as I say, other SIT volunteers in the SIT phase are welcome, and although we'll be prioritising the MVC in order to execute the coverage, we will have where we will support other SIT participants to also complete their coverage and offer an earlier route into migration. Based on feedback from the implementation approach slides, I've re-summarised some of the points here on the right-hand side of the bottom of the slide. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to skip forward to the next slide, which hopefully will give a clearer picture of kind of the route into SIT and then how we manage that. So as we mentioned earlier in the presentation, we're asking for participants to inform the programme of their intention to volunteer, if possible by the 16th of January. But if you can't meet that date, then by the time you are responding to the consultation at the end of January, so you'll still be able to be considered as a candidate for SIT if you can't respond until the end of the month. We'll then be assuring those volunteers delivery plans, and then we'll be looking to confirm SIT candidates by the 23rd of April 23. And at this point, as I mentioned, there'll be no distinction between the MVC and other SIT participants. That will be assessed and confirmed later on. Then what we'll be doing is monitoring participants' PIT execution, ensuring that everyone's got themselves into a position of readiness in terms of environment connectivity, that the test data has been allocated into systems for those participants where data is being provided, and verifying that that's all in place. We'll be onboarding participants onto the test management tool and assuring any PIT artifacts as they are released through the process, and then culminating in a completion report, which will also be assured. Once we enter SIT, what we're doing at the moment in the SIT working group is we're developing a progressive integration approach during SIT, which we're going to start off with the DIP provider and Helix, hopefully then integrating MPRS and then other participant roles in 2-week intervals. And what we're trying to do there is build up confidence gradually through that phase, and then, as I say, we'll do that in 2-week cycles, with the last entrance being SIT end minus 2 weeks, which is currently 29th of Jan 24 in the plan. And then when we move into functional testing, we'll be seeking to identify an MVC as soon as possible. That will be based on the highest number of tests successfully executed, and obviously we'll consider the number of defects as well. And then we'll continue to monitor and maintain that MVC via general review, general monitoring and periodic review. And then, should there be certain participants in that group that fall behind, there is the opportunity to possibly bring in other SIT participants that are progressing well. What we're trying to do then is then also start the other stages of testing during the functional period. So we've got SIT migration, SIT NFT, and SIT operational test stages. They'll be operating in a separate environment, and there'll be there's a certain degree of overlap in the plan at the moment, but we're looking to operate that via careful scheduling. what we're recommending is other SIT participants commence those test stages at the same time. But as with functional testing, we'll also continue to support those other participants for a longer period of time in the environment up until the 7th of April. And just to note, any SIT participant that drops out of SIT testing for any reason would then need to proceed via the non-SIT route. But we are talking to the code delivery bodies about a principle of actually crediting whatever execution has occurred in SIT to support the qualification. Just going to pause there if there's any questions around that. Okay, no hands up there. So what's depicted here is the timelines for the SIT stages. So if you can see on the left-hand side there, the different swim lanes for each SIT stage. So as I mentioned, SIT CIT test execution is going to be where we're progressively integrating SIT participants. And then we'll look to start SIT functional testing from the 27th of Feb 24. As I say, at that point, when we start functional testing, there'll be no distinction between the MVC and SIT participants. We've broken that down into 3 cycles. The intention is that in cycle 1, we will execute as much of the test coverage as possible, but obviously acknowledging that during that stage, that particular cycle, we're likely to flush out some defects that need resolving. So we've built in two further cycles where we would look to complete defect retesting and any targeted regression testing, with an aim to then freeze the core systems by the 21st of October. You can see that just ahead of cycle 2, we're looking to start SIT migration testing, which we think is going to be largely functional in nature. And so that feeds into that core systems code freeze as well there. Once we've frozen the code, we'll be running a regression phase, and then as you can see there depicted after the end of the SIT functional MVC testing, we've got a period of continued support for other participants to carry on and close out their test coverage. The SIT migration, SIT NFT and SIT ops stages, as you can see, are depicted there. And again, you know, there is a continued period of time where participants outside of the MVC can continue executing. However, as mentioned, we will be prioritising the MVC execution within the agenda. And so, you know, that's why we're recommending that other participants do seek to start at the same time and hopefully, if possible, can keep up with the MVC. And then at the bottom 2 swim lanes there, non-SIT testing. Sorry, I've got a hand up there from Tom.
Yeah, sorry, I will go in. If you're cycle 2 and 3, you know, if everything goes well through cycle 1, have you got an ability to shorten or do away with cycle 2 or 3?
Yeah, there is potential to do that. I mean, it would be great if we were in that situation.
I'm trying to look at a positive view.
Yeah, not depicted in this particular POAP, but it is in the plan. We've got a couple of checkpoints ahead of cycle 2 and 3 to assess where we've got to basically and see if we've got any opportunities to bring the plan forward and potentially start execution sooner. Obviously, there would be some prep activity we'd also need to pull forward if that was the case. But yeah, we have put some checkpoints in there for if things are going well.
Okay, that's good. And that would therefore bring the whole programme forward.
Well, there would be the potential. Obviously, we'd have to assess the whole plan if that was the case. But yeah, that would be a great position to be in.
Okay, and the second question is,
yep,
on your chart there, you show a line coming down into qualification execution start.
Yep.
Why is that linked there and not earlier?
So at that point, we should have concluded all of the MVC testing, and so we will have confidence in the solution, so that we should be able to start the qualification from a stable platform. And so therefore, it's a case of not testing the central system anymore, or the central solution. It's a case of a different objective, obviously, for qualification, which is more participants proving their fitness to participate in the market. So yeah, hopefully we've got a stable base that we can achieve that qualification execution at that point.
And I think the point I'll make now is that qualification at the moment under the BSc is based on equivalent to your PIT testing. So it's
Yeah,
participant demonstrating that they're able to do things and a review of the test evidence they provide.
Yeah, I'm aware of that. So that's the BAU position
it
going
would seem
in.
to
Yeah.
be a lot quicker to use that rather than what might find out about a bit later.
Yeah, so the recommendation here from the program is that due to the level of change associated with the program, we think there's a case to actually run some test execution in an integrated environment. And that's a principle that we're working to here. It is our recommendation as a program at the moment. The code delivery bodies are in agreement, but obviously we do need to identify exactly what the scope of that testing is going to be and develop that via the qualification working group.
Yeah, none of that's been debated in the qualification working group at this point.
Not at this point,
no. That's part of the frustration, that looking for some clarity on that in the next 3 months, according to the earlier comments.
That's right. Yeah, that's the timescale. Hand up from Greg.
Yeah, hi. So Greg Wedge from Eon.
there.
So I've got one question I didn't quite catch when you said that the SIT workshops were going to begin. That was just the first one. When did
So the SIT working groups, I think the first one was the beginning of December, was it? So they are on now. They're the first week of the month. We have actually got an extraordinary SIT working group week after next planned as well. So at the moment we're developing the high level scope for SIT CIT and SIT functional. Obviously we understand that people are quite interested to know this and may influence their decision to be part of SIT. So yeah, we can get you added to the invite, Greg, if that's what you'd like. And we'll get the previous papers over to you as well.
Yeah, that would be good. Thank you very much. And as part of that workshop, would we get more of an idea of kind of the resource requirements that we would have to put into entering into SIT? So I'm thinking from like a project planning perspective at the minute, we're currently looking at the resource that we have. So I saw from some of your previous slides, you are expecting us to get involved in quite a lot of the detail, like your script writing, etc. So I don't know if you were going to put any kind of markers out there for roughly how much time per week that you're expecting all of this to take, just from our perspective, that we understand how much resource we need to put aside.
Yeah, so first of all, my recommendation would be to obviously look at the impact of the design and then do an impact assessment internally based on the amount of PIT testing that you'll need to do based on the impact for your particular systems. During the SIT working group, we're developing an approach and plan. We will begin to look at what that schedule how that schedule will work through the testing in a bit more detail in the working groups, and that there will be information in the approaches and plans. But I think we'll probably end up firming that up a bit more as we get closer to the execution. So I think really at this stage it's about doing an impact assessment based on the level of change you've got, but also taking into account the high level scope that we're developing at the moment for the different roles. And I think that will probably inform your estimate.
Yeah. Okay, that's perfect. And I've got one final question. It's a bit of a SIT / qualification question. I have mentioned it in a couple of responses before. So we were hoping to get further clarity on the participation in SIT and the qualification process. So an example is that we've got a software vendor who's part of the program, who deliver a system for us, which they are going to enter into SIT and participate and enroll the system that we solely use into SIT. Would their participation in SIT qualify our system if they do it on our behalf, or would we still be expected to put our hand up to participate in SIT, even if they're going to be doing the work for us on our system in our testing?
Okay, so I'm not going to answer that question here. But in terms of placing reliance as a concept, we are entertaining that principle. We don't want to see participants have to do more testing than they need to. And we are developing that approach in the SIT working group. So we've started the conversation on that in the last working group. We're going to continue to look at that in the extraordinary working group week after next. And so we are looking to form a view with the working group on that approach. But yes, we are considering that principle.
Okay, perfect. So I was going to say the only other option would be that, do you know how you said that you're going to like pair up participants in SIT? It would just be that, let's just say if we said, okay, we'll go into SIT because our system has been enrolled by a software provider, just to ensure that we were paired up rather than it being randomly selected. That was probably just the
we are looking at that, and we'll speak to you in detail on that.
Nice one. Thank you very much for answering those.
No probs. So just to finish up on this, Pope. So the swim lanes at the bottom there. So we've called out the fact that we're now looking to bring forward the testing for non-SIT LDSOs. So this was originally planned to be in the first tranche of qualification. However, we've realised that we need to bring it forward with the later stages of SIT so that we can achieve the M10 and M11 milestones. So that testing is in there. Again, this will be testing that is equivalent to what would be run in qualification. It's just we're looking to do it a little bit earlier. And so that's a change from round 2 to round 3. And then just to point out, we've got the end-to-end sandbox execution starting in line with the core systems code freeze. So this is an opportunity for participants to do any additional testing they want to in a supported environment. This will go on for a long period of time. I think it's an additional 3 months after the end of the last tranche of qualification. It's also an opportunity for participants to run some DBT2 testing within an integrated environment, which may be easier. But yeah, just to highlight that there. And then we mentioned the qualification execution start. We're looking to commence that from the point where we've established successful completion of the MVC coverage. So again, I'm going to pause there just if there's any further questions. Okay, thank you. I think I'm handing over to Jason now, aren't I? Yeah.
Thanks, Dom. Jason, over to you.
Great. And actually, Dom has referenced quite a lot of material as well. So I will hopefully build on what Dom has covered and cover this from a qualification perspective. I'll also make sure I talk through the timings and the tranches as per Laurie's questions earlier. So to start on qualification, so as has been referenced a number of times against a number of different areas, we have the working groups up and running for different areas of the programme, and qualification is one of those, the qualification working group. And we are starting to bring material to that, as Tom referenced earlier. We are in the early stages of the material we're bringing to the qualification working group, but we will be bringing our early views on the approach and plan to the next few qualification working groups in order to get momentum going on that. I say we, I'm going to start by talking about the bottom right of the slide, which is an unusual order, I appreciate, but it's important to talk about the responsibilities for qualification. So the responsibilities for qualification are going to sit with the code bodies, and that's the right place for it, because ultimately it is the code bodies and the performance assurance boards of the code bodies who will approve qualified parties as being fit for purpose to enter into the new MHHS arrangements. So we have Elexon on behalf of the BSc developing the qualification requirements for the BSc. We've got RECCO looking at REC, And I think the SEC and DCC requirements are pretty well set out in the SEC and are part of the MP 162 requirements. So what we have here is a snapshot of the assumptions and the best state of understanding at the moment. I'll start by just running through the constituent elements of qualification. And sorry, I think there's a chat around. I'll come back to your question, Tom, about execution. So the content of qualification, we have 4 elements of qualification that we're assuming at the moment that will progress through development. The first is a procedural and governance element. So as I say, the performance assurance boards will be approving the qualified parties for entry into BSc operations and REC operations, and that will be done at the performance assurance boards. There is a large element currently of self-assessment documentation that supports all of that, and a playbook for how you go through the qualification process. So Alexon are looking at how that gets adapted for, and Bretco, how that gets adapted for the MHHS environment. We're assuming there will be a self-assessment document and it will go through a similar process. So there's an administrative and process element that currently can take some time. So we are planning a reasonable amount of time for that, and I'll cover that in the timescales in a minute. The second element is the evidence of pre-integration testing for DB-T1, which Dom talked about earlier. That is a prerequisite to enter qualification in the same way it is to enter SIT. So I won't repeat what Dom said earlier. 3 is evidence of DBT2 testing. Now, DBT2 testing is around consequential change. When it comes to independent agents, at this point, I don't believe that we think there is any DB2 testing, DBT2 testing, because the agent roles are described in their entirety in the MHHS design. So we're expecting DBT1 testing and qualification testing to cover the functionality of the agent roles. There are DBT2 testing requirements on network operators and on suppliers, because we want to see some evidence of consequential change and the robust testing of consequential change, so that we have confidence in the operation of the end-to-end arrangements. So I just want to specifically pick out sort of the agent element of this. And then the fourth is the testing of scenarios for qualification itself. And again, I'll build on what Dom said earlier in response to Tom's question. We are assuming that there is test execution associated with qualification. This is a new set of arrangements. It's more like going live in 1998 than it is undertaking a risk-based assessment of change and modifications to the code. So we are assuming that we have a new set of roles, we have a new set of functionality, and therefore PAB will want to execute testing to provide confidence in those roles and the participants in advance of coming into migration. Now, there is a difference between SIT and qualification. SIT, we are looking at the end-to-end testing of the arrangements as a whole on the basis of end-to-end test scenarios. So that will take data and functions through multiple parties as part of end-to-end testing. When it comes for qualification, we're going to be testing on a role-by-role basis. So we'll be drawing a circle around those individual participants and those individual roles, and we will look to test the functionality and the interfaces associated with those participants on a role-by-role basis. Now, we've put in here that we're expecting it to be a subset of SIT. That's because we're expecting the end-to-end tests to replicate functionality in some areas, because we may need to execute the same processes for the purposes of different end-to-end tests. But when it comes to qualification of the individual roles and participants, we'll be looking to execute the functionality associated with those roles. It's not the same scope of end-to-end testing. So I just want to explain the broad assumptions underpinning the scope of qualification, but all of this will be brought out in the qualification working group and the content and scope of the testing. We do intend to build on all the materials that are built for SIT. So we shouldn't be reinventing the wheel here. We should be able to cut the elements of testing that are required for us to test on a role by role basis. So when we identify what the program's going to do, you know, we will be providing the material that we've got for SIT, including test harnesses and test management and other elements associated with that. So I'm going to move on from this slide because this has got the timings in. I'm gonna run through the blue chevrons in the middle because that's around qualification. The top one is around qualification testing preparation. So as Tom highlighted earlier, and as we're developing in the QWG, there's a lot of preparatory activity being undertaken. And the first milestone we've got in here is around the testing approach and plan being approved. Now, one of the things that I'm also going to be covering the code drafting in the next section, but one of the things we're looking at in the programme is we've got a set of code drafting associated with qualification that is due to start this year. And we have the qualification testing approach and plan also due to be approved in a very similar timeline. So we're looking internally as to what the dependencies are between that test approach and plan and what we might put into the code drafting for qualification. So that is still under consideration in the programme, and we'll take that into account in the next iteration of the plan. So that preparation, there's a lot of activities in the MPP and the more detailed plan that underpin that test preparation, but that's a bucket chevron to cover all of those along the top. The qualification SAD process is what I talked about earlier under point 1. So that's the administrative self-assessment documentation. And that is planned to start straight after we baseline the code drafting. So once we know what the qualification code drafting is and that's approved, then participants can start to apply, and we will allow for the application of qualification, so you have as much time as possible to go through that governance and administrative procedure. And then the next chevron down is the qualification testing execution itself, and also the PAB approval. So qualification testing execution at the moment is planned for a 12-month window. It's planned for 6-month qualification tranches, and they're on a cadence of monthly tranches to align with the cadence of the performance assurance board meetings under code governance. So there's a first tranche of qualification started in January 2025. Then another one will start in February, another one in March. So there are 7 tranches in all. And we are also assuming a 2-month period after the end of qualification testing to allow for PAB approval and mobilisation of test environments. So that is an assumption at the moment. It's been the 12-month period has been an assumption that was in the original Ofgem transition timetable. So we are going through a review of whether that is a reasonable timescale and how the tranching goes with Elexon at the moment. So that is subject to review. We've got the best assumptions we have at the moment on that. Tom, I see you have your hand up.
I do, and you know what I'm going to say, because we've been exchanging emails even this morning on these subjects. First off, the milestone in terms of the qualification testing approach, you carefully answered, because the code drafting is due to start mid-April. Yet the approach document on this plan isn't due to happen till mid-May. Yep. So that's an inconsistency and a problem, and obviously I'd prefer to see it move forward rather than moving the code drafting backwards. because we want to get on and get this delivered, don't we?
Yeah, and that's as I said, that's why we're having our discussions around the dependencies between that product and the code drafting. So we need to understand what we need to go into the code drafting and how that matches with what goes in the approach and plans. So those discussions are ongoing at the moment.
Indeed. The other point I wanted to make was the code drafting. You have a linkage between that and the qualification SAD process.
Yeah.
The qualification has been said for a year or more is based on the design artifacts, not on the code drafting. So therefore, I don't see there should be a linkage there, and therefore the qualification SAD process should be able to start earlier than that.
In the discussions we've been having in the CCAG, the conclusion was that in order for the BSc and RECCO to start receiving applications and going through the process, we should have certainty on what the legal drafting is for that qualification process. So that's the dependency that's come through the discussions in the CCAG. If you got a view that can be done earlier, happy to get that through the consultation responses, Tom, and we can look into that. But at the moment, the code bodies want to have that process approved and sitting in the codes before they have the actual process initiated. Now, there's nothing to stop participants if they've seen where we've got to on it, starting to prepare for that, I don't think. But that was the rationale for it.
Well, the debate we've had in CCAG, in my view, was that the qualification stuff is due to be drafted next summer, and therefore there is the ability to do things well in advance rather than waiting till April the following year to progress, link those things. And if you remember, that was a challenge that CCAG put in terms of the timing of the whole sequence. But let's not debate it now. I think there's an opportunity for bringing things forward there. And in terms of the last comment, in terms of monthly tranching, if the driver for that is the BSc PAB or other PAB meet monthly, then as a BSc PAB member, if this speeds up this programme by meeting weekly to approve things, then I'm sure the BSc PAB would be willing to do that.
That would be great. And if we're looking at the tranching approach in the QWG, hopefully you can feed that in and we can take that into account.
Yeah,
I say it will be owned by BSc Co.
Well, indeed, but my experience on the BSc PAB is that parties look to do things by a date. It doesn't happen, and therefore, they may slip, but they want to get approval as quick as they probably can. And in this plan, at the moment you've got 6 months gap between the SIT participants participating and the first tranche of qualified parties coming through. If we could reduce that 6 months down to, 0 or a month, then that would allow migration and lots of other parties to get in and get going quicker.
Yeah, and the 6 month is an assumption. If a party can complete their qualification testing earlier and go to PAB and ticked all the boxes earlier, then there's no reason why not. We're not looking to put artificial constraints in there. So it's just an assumption for planning based purposes at the moment.
Well, I'm not sure that's come across clear in the plan, but Jason, but I'm pleased to hear that. Thank you.
I mean, the way that the way the qualification process works is that you go through the SAD, you go through your submission, and at the point where you can tick all the boxes and put it in front of PAB for approval, then PAB will be able to look at the evidence and make their decision accordingly. I don't know because I'm not in control of it because it will be Elexon, but I can't imagine that the process will artificially hold people back to wait for the end of a 6 monthly test cycle.
I would not want it to hold people back because ultimately we want as many people through this process as quick as we can.
Yeah.
So we can get the migration going at some pace.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we probably need to move on. I'm just conscious of time and giving Aid enough room at the end to cover his sections. So if we can move on further down, code drafting, I think you probably touched on a fair amount of this already now.
Yeah, I have done actually, Giles, and we're running to 3:30, aren't we? So
We are, yeah.
Yeah, I'll whistle through this because we do have a set of activities associated with code drafting. I'll concentrate on the changes from round 2 because you're probably all familiar with where we were with round 2. The main change to code drafting between round 2 and round 3 is the implementation of change request 12, which included consequential change drafting into the program activities for code drafting. And the reason for that is it's good for industry to have a single set of consolidated code drafting for your approval and consideration and release. The alternative would be code bodies develop a separate set of activities for consequential change, and we find a way of mashing those together into a release at the end, which would be pretty inefficient and could introduce inconsistencies. So that's why CR12 was implemented. But it does mean, Joe, if you move to the next slide, it does mean that we have an additional set of activities in there under topic I for consequential change. So that is a new part of code drafting that's in the round 3 plan that wasn't in round 2. As a consequence, that's pushed out M6, which is the finalization of the code drafting, by a couple of months to April. But we can do that because the code drafting does not sit on the critical path. The only dependency we've got at the moment is from there into the qualification SAD process that we talked about earlier. So that is the change in the code drafting area from round 2. And the next slide is just a generic timetable for the development and review of each of the code topics. And importantly, activity 3, we are going out for industry review for every topic. So there is the opportunity for participants who will ultimately be bound by the code to provide their comments into that drafting process. We also have the code drafting working group reviewing that, which is an open working group at level 4. So anyone can attend that before it goes to CCAG for approval on a constituency basis. So that's all I was going to say on code drafting, conscious of time as well.
Okay, thanks, Jason. We're going to move swiftly on to migration. So, Aid, over to you.
Hi everyone, afternoon. Adrian Page, I'm the SI lead on the team, and I'll actually spend 5 minutes on this because I'm conscious of time. So having completed either the SIP journey or the qualification journey, energy suppliers are in a position to migrate their MPANs. And I've just got in here 2 or 3 slides out of the implementation approach in the Replan that I just wanted to highlight 2 or 3 things on and flag up the working groups as being the forums that we're using to develop these further. So bottom right of this slide talks about, in the text box there, the migration design. That design has been developed through the migration design subgroup reporting to DAG. That is meeting weekly now, led by John Wiggins, and picking up, as it says on the tin there, the design, including reverse migration. As that design starts to take shape, we've been feeding that into what needs to happen with regard to a migration approach and strategy, and we're using the migration working group, which is the second working group there, to help share and develop ideas and concepts with regard to what that migration approach should look like, what the strategy should be, what the timescales are, the model, which I'll come to in a second, and also picking up within that around data and data quality, and the need to probably perform some type of data cleansing exercise by industry parties that will be managed and monitored by ourselves on the programme here, but actual actions will be taken by the various industry parties. If we just skip forward 1 slide, or move forward 1 slide, from a modelling perspective, and this is what's driven the change from 12 months to 18 months that Giles referred to at the beginning of the meeting. We've been looking at what the approximate model could be for the migration. And as you'll see on the left there, it talks about 3 stages, an initial ramp up stage. So this will be something like 4 months worth of activity with an increasing number of MPANs migrating each month. These will be from successful SIT parties, MVC parties on the whole. And I've just put an assumption in there that at the moment we'd expect there to be something like 5 million MPANs available to enable us to get going with that activity over those first period of the migration. And we'll be able to validate that as we get the responses through, as Dominic talked about from a SIT perspective. Also in there is that belief set that all the LDSOs have been through their non-SIT testing, and therefore we don't have any geographic restriction in place. That will quickly turn into full-scale migration, looking at something like 160,000 MPANs a day going across the industry. And that will be a mixture of people coming through SIT, MVC, people coming through SIT, non-MVC, and the first of those tranches that we've just been talking about coming through qualification. High-level assumption that would cover about 95% of MPANs, and then there'll be a final 5% that needs managing. These will invariably have some dirty data on them and some awkwardness in general, and we need to work as effectively as we can to move those last few across. But belief set there that we will as an industry definitely slow down in the last few months there as we get those across. We've been talking a bit, we did literally yesterday afternoon just talked about that in a bit more detail at the migration working group, and a number of good suggestions were coming out of that. So this will be continue to be developed. So if we just move on to the next slide, what that would look like from a timescale perspective at the bottom there is those 2 blue lines at the bottom. So you've got people being able to commence the migration of their MPANs in April 25. From those people who've come through SIT MVC, they will be relatively quickly followed by people coming through from SIT non-MVC. And then at the moment, as we were just talking about with Tom and Jason there, we've got a 6-month delay until people can come through from qualification, because we've got that planning assumption of 6 months there, plus the 2 months, 6 months later from a migration perspective, 8 months from when they start qualification, being the 6 months to do qualification and the 2 months to do the governance and PAB exercise. Obviously, as we were just alluding to there, if we can do stuff to bring that forward and enable people to start migrating, that would be beneficial for all parties. What we've got in there then is that 18-month period that takes us through to October 2026. I'm going to very quickly hand the baton for 30 seconds to Jason to just talk about M16, and then I'll just follow up with a couple of points at the end there.
Yeah, just very quickly, there's a change from round 2 to round 3 around M16 as well, which is the cut over to the new settlement timetable. We'd originally had that as a milestone 2 months after the migration had completed. What we are recognising in the latest round of the plan is that it's not a simple alignment with a date. What we'll want to do, and what BSC Co will want to do, is consider the stability of the arrangements set against a set of criteria. So we don't want to be tied to a date and driven by a date. We want to be assessing against a set of criteria. So we're allowing for that M16 date to be from 2 to 8 months after the migration is completed, importantly setting a backstop date. So we have set a backstop date of 6 months in that window, so we aren't running parallel arrangements for an indeterminable period of time. So that's just a quick whistle-stop tour of why we put that window in for M16 approval.
Okay, if I could just pick up for another 30 seconds or so, move forward a couple of slides, please, Joe. What we've then got is the need to provide business operational readiness for those MPANs as they initially come across and are settled on the old timetable, and then as we move across to that new timetable that Jason's just referred to. Key thing in here is that participants need to have service management models in place, and we as want to be able to provide assurance to the industry as a whole that there's a complete model there across the various parties, be that DCC, Helix, energy suppliers, etc., so that we know that we've got service management in place to deal with incidents as and when they arise. And then in the second bullet there, a need to make sure that's enhanced potentially during the period of migration, particularly bearing in mind parties could be MPANs could be reverse migrating back into old arrangements as well. So just an awareness at the moment that needs to be carefully considered with all those parties to make sure that we can deal with any issues, triage them, etc., and resolve them and move forward. Picked up outside because I know you want to just ask for any generic questions there, Giles, and wrap up.
Yeah, I think we. Yeah, I'll just have a couple of minutes just for any general questions across anything that we've discussed this afternoon from anybody. I don't see any hands up. I'm just going to look into the chat. There's a comment in here just around, are there only £5 million available in the first phase if all the suppliers and all their respective services are approved through SIT? This is one reason we need to bring forward the timing of the qualification route. I think it's probably one, if I could perhaps suggest, Aid, that we take up and pick up offline on that one.
Yeah, obviously that's an assumption. We've got that 5 million figure at the moment, yep. And as we find out next month who wants to play in the SIT arena, we'll be able to validate that and talk about whether we can accelerate the migration or indeed have to slow it down because we've got fewer.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Aid. Okay, I'm just going to wrap the call up here because I'm very conscious that we've got one minute to go. It just leaves me to firstly thank everybody for your time this afternoon. I know this has been a significant portion out of your day to attend this, but I hope you found it useful to have an end-to-end overview across the plan. We have got slightly squeezed on any wrap-up questions at the end. I'm really conscious of that, but in the consultation papers, you'll find that there's the PMO address for any questions that you might have, either from this afternoon directly or indeed mulling over or looking at the recording again afterwards. So please do send those through. We really welcome your questions. It's a further validation that we've got the plan complete and also that we hope we haven't left any gaps as well. So really do welcome those, and we'll respond back to you via the PMO from the right areas across the programme. A couple of questions here around when will the slides be circulated? They will go up onto the collaboration website within the next, I'm going to say, working day. So I'd hope by Monday lunchtime latest. And we'll also publish the recording up onto the website as well. If you're absolutely desperate to see these materials, the last 2 playback sessions will show you the same PowerPoint as well. So you can have an earlier version of this, but I suspect you may want the commentary over what we've discussed today. Just in terms of the questions, I sort of noted where some of them are coming from. I would actually just urge everybody on this call to really digest the artifacts that we've sent out. In the implementation approach, there is a lot more detail around what we've presented today. And I think, Tom, to some of your questions, we hopefully have got more narrative in there and be more explicit around some of the assumptions that we've taken as well. So I would go and look at the implementation approach in addition. I think that's it from me. Again, thank you all for your time, and have a good weekend when you get there. Thank you.